On this week's Mailbag episode, the vibes, man, let me tell you folks, they could not get any worse. The San Diego Padres losing out on Jurickson Profar, rumors of Michael King being made available for trade, as well as, of course, it's the Mailbag answering a lot of your questions and comments, including from the very unbiased Dodgers fans, as always, and a lot more. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Tuesday, January 28th. As always, I'm your host, with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, especially on the lattermost. I feel like I'm slowly starting to use that a little bit more. Just a little bit cleaner for my taste. But still, of course, guys, send me all of your questions so you have the chance to be featured on today's episode, the mailbag segment that we do usually every Monday or Tuesday. I did it Tuesday because appointment came up by the time everybody's listening to this, so I just didn't record in time. And not going to lie, I was busy watching the Wild football game, so I didn't have a chance Sunday night. But nonetheless, feel free to reach out there for your questions because I love hearing from you guys. No matter what it is, I genuinely like hearing from you, and sometimes really good perspectives from the other side, including Dodgers fans, like kind of calling me out, I think correctly in some cases. Today's episode, though, is brought to you by Gametime, one of our favorite sponsors. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. We got a lot to talk about today, folks. And I mean a lot to talk about, all right? I don't even frankly know where to start. This offseason has been just the hellscape of all time. You know what I mean? This has been scorched earth. This has been absolutely awful for the Padres in basically every way. And there's been so much that actually happened over the weekend. And I think that it first starts with, let's start with Jurickson Profar. Jurickson Profar, it was announced agreeing to a deal with the Atlanta Braves, 3 years, $42 million. I must say, he's got a Braves vibe to him, you know what I mean? And I mean that because they've just, they've had some Dominican players over there. Obviously, they have Venezuelan players like Ronald Acuna, but they've just had like a really kind of, I don't know. There's just something about that team. I think that they've also had a knack for getting the most out of some of their underperforming players, or I should say, not even their underperforming players, but other underperforming players, where they bring them in and they just kind of, usually when they go after a guy that some people don't believe in, they know what they're doing, right? So whether that be when they won the World Series that one year by going for Soler and Adam Duvall and Eddie Rosario, Jurickson Profar, his market was a little bit shallow this offseason. Like, clearly, I don't think he was necessarily getting the market that he wanted. And I was actually starting to wonder at one point if this was getting to the point of what happened to him not last year, but the year before, when he ended up having to settle really late with the Rockies, and the rest is history, right? But great deal for him. Love Profar. I'm going to miss him very, very much, guys. Very, very much. We don't have the time to do a giant love letter for a Jurickson Profar episode, but this, along with the news of Michael King, which came out yesterday, and the report basically from MLB Trade Rumors, just to read kind of the intro of it. The month of January almost done. Pitchers and catchers will be reporting spring training in only a couple of weeks, but still a lot of business left to resolve in the offseason, but it's gotten a little bit stalled, right? Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic reports that part of the reason things are moving slowly is that there are still lots of ongoing trade talks with Dylan Cease and Michael King of the Padres among the starting pitchers who remain in play. Cease's name has been in plenty of rumors this winter, but this is the first indication of the winter that King is potentially available as well. The logic for the Friars considering a trade is the same for both pitchers, as each is going into his final season of arbitration control. The Padres are clearly working with financial restraints this winter, though their exact spending ability isn't totally clear. For much of the winter, reporting indicated that they needed to cut their projected 2025 payroll, but reporting from recent days suggests the club may be able to keep their projected spending around its current level, give or take. All right, so first let's talk about the Profar side of this. And I think that one of the things that happened over this weekend is we had a bunch of articles from Kevin Acee of the San Diego Union Tribune drop as well, talking about Profar and whatnot. And losing Profar obviously is a huge blow for this team. We were getting to the point where we were kind of hopeful that maybe he could be an option. I think Padres fans, myself included, did not realize I mean, I couldn't have realized, right? I don't have, inside sources to that degree, that there was going to be this lawsuit issue, but I did not anticipate how much it would handicap the Padres. I really did kind of feel like we were going to be heading for an offseason where they make like one move, kind of like what Baltimore did with Tyler O'Neill, except that would be it. You know what I mean? And then maybe they get a catcher and maybe they move some money around too, right? Maybe they trade a Robert Suarez. Maybe they trade a Dylan Cease or a Luis Ariz, right? Maybe they do that, but I did think that they would make something of an addition, considering that they were only one game away from the NLCS and potentially the World Series, because in my opinion, again, my unbiased opinion, I think that the Padres were the best team in the playoffs last year. Like, in terms of just not how it went, but just as a whole, I think the Dodgers were really handicapped with injuries. Some of their players weren't performing very well, and one of their best players, Shohei Ohtani, was not completely, but he was very much canceled out a lot by a player like Tanner Scott, right? So that was where I was, and for the response to be what we've seen this offseason is really, really rough. And again, let me just talk about this really quickly. Acee wrote 2 articles in the past few days. One of them, which was headlined basically despite the doom and gloom vibe, the Padres are still expected to have a top 10 payroll and a 20% increase in overall payroll. Here's the thing, right, with that, and I've read both articles. I think with the payroll one, that one is the less excusable one, or the more, let's say, the more frustrating one that Kevin Acee wrote. The reason why is because the article to imply that is very, especially right now, like, it's very odd for you to say that and talk about how the payroll is still in the top 10 when they haven't done anything, and this ownership group has not done that spending, right? It was with Peter and obviously AJ, they spent the money on Bogarts and Musgrove, and you guys know that parts, but I think that's why that article was a little bit annoying. The 20% increase is a result of just the hiking prices of some pitchers and some players, right? So Manny Machado's contract, I'm pretty sure, increases, right? Like, it increased by a bunch this year, and that's what happens when they sign deals that are a little bit backloaded or middle loaded or front loaded, whatever kind of configuration that teams come up with. And that's where we are right now, right? So that was a little bit frustrating. And then there was an article that Kevin Acee wrote about Sheel Seidler and the lawsuit, and basically saying that her claims in the lawsuit differ from what Acee is hearing and according to his sources. And again, it's Twitter. Although, a little bit of a soapbox for a second, I do think we sometimes, and we've learned over the years, that we shouldn't totally minimize online. Like, you should definitely try to stay offline and be a little bit normal to some degree, but clearly online is more significant of a portrayal of people's thoughts on things than I think we used to think. I think people used to be like, oh, that's just Twitter. Now it's like, it's not nothing. It's not a lot of something, but it's definitely like, a little bit amount of merit. And basically a lot of people were reacting to this one being like, this is billionaire propaganda. And I have 2 sides of this, pro and anti, for the article. The pro is that for me, Kevin Acee did a really good job covering all the bases, like every aspect of this story, from her ties to the team, whether she appeared at ownership meetings. And everybody should go check out the article. It was really, really good. Well done. Kind of checked about every aspect of this, right? To every single kind of, not every single thing, not literally, because the lawsuits are huge. If you guys don't know, it's like 80 pages, right? But went into a lot of the things, the paper note, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of things, and he, he got some responses from Sheel herself in an email from her and her representative team and all that stuff. I thought that he did a good job of just doing all that. And as he says in the story, many who spoke, while it is frustrating, I know, for a lot of people outside, but it can be very frustrating to hear reports that are only anonymous sources. But that's kind of the name of the game sometimes. And Acee himself mentions many who spoke for the story on the condition of anonymity did so because they said they did not want to become part of the legal wrangling. Others said they were fearful of retribution. Some said they were not authorized to speak by their employer. And that could mean anything. It can go on both ways, right? I do think Padres fans and the fan base, you have to be very careful into assuming that the Seidler brothers are awful, right? And also, you have to be careful in assuming that Sheel is awful and she's just trying to come in and get her money and take control of this team and whatnot. And it's also important to note that, we don't know exactly what's going on in the inner workings of this. But one thing that is for sure that we do know about ownership is clearly the Padres are screwed right now with this whole thing because they haven't spent anything. But As easy as it is, like I said, to be annoyed with anonymous sources, it's still, I think that the article does paint a decent picture of being like, this is still a they said, she said situation, right? And that's what he said in the article, right? So that's my thing in pro of Kevin Acee in terms of just like why I didn't mind the article. I'm not saying that there aren't some issues with it. We're going to get to those in a second. But I do think that overall, on face value, I thought the article was well done for the most part. And I know, again, anonymous sources can be frustrating when you can't get all on the record. And I will say that there were parts of the story that I did feel were more focusing on the negatives of Sheel as opposed to the article didn't really talk enough. Granted, but he mentions, though, this is why I think it was well detailed, that the Seidler brothers didn't want to comment. AJ Preller didn't want to comment. A bunch of people didn't want to comment. Like, that's where things get complicated and becomes a they said, she said. But I do understand some people's frustration with reading that and being like, damn, I mean, there's like nothing in this article that really, at a commensurate rate, as to what they were doing with Sheel and some of her claims that Acee, plenty of resources and sources, and everybody got on him for the Manny Machado article last year when he talked to him himself for 30 minutes and talked to multiple other sources, that I understand people being frustrated that a little bit of Sheel criticism and not the commensurate amount for the Seidler brothers in that article. So I do get that. But I think there's something else that we got to talk about with this article and the in general state of the Padres, as well as Michael King. Like I said, it's a busy show today, guys. What can I say? But first, we need to talk about our sponsor of the day, and that is our good friends over at, I want you guys to guess, it's the one at the top of the show, of course, Gametime, ladies and gentlemen. Attending NFL playoff games is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together. And let me tell you, I've been dying to go to Lambeau. I don't know what it is. I just want to be on the frozen tundra. I want to be with that diehard fan base so bad. Just see what it's like. You know what I mean? And the excitement, energy of a playoff game is something that you will never forget, folks. And Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. I'll be using it next season, trying to get my Lambeau tickets, believe me. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. It's great, guys. NFL playoff games, baseball games coming up, right? The season's going to be here before you know it. That's the one positive today. Padres are suffering right now, but let me tell you, the season's going to be here in a minute. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account and code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed with Gametime. And just like that, everybody, we are back into Locked On Padres segment number 2. I gave you kind of my defense of the Kevin Acee article and my genuine feelings about it. Let's talk about the ante. And the ante is pretty obvious, right? I don't want to dismiss the articles. Let me be very clear. However, the timing, just after Jurickson Profar with the one about the payroll, right? Just around that time of Jurickson Profar signing with another team after not only having a good season, but having his best season and being clearly one of the most beloved players that this team, in my opinion, has had of the last 10 years. I genuinely feel that. There's just something about him. You can see it in the dugout. You can see it with the fan base. They love this guy. He's got all the smiles, everything, right? That is kind of how I feel about him, right? So lose that. And then for this article to come out about then, right? It doesn't bode well. And then on top of that, you get an article about Sheel Seidler, right? You get an article about Sheel Seidler and kind of criticizing her perspective, right? Her claims and whatnot, which of course she does respond to some of them. But I think, the timing of that isn't great either, right? And I just think that that's not great because the timing of that one coincides with the report from Ken Rosenthal that the Padres are shipping Michael King. And by the way, the Michael King thing was exactly the same as the Jurickson Profar thing, right? The Jurickson Profar, I think the Acee's analysis one on the spending was the 25th, I believe, is when that dropped. And let me see. The 25th. Yeah, so one day after the Jurickson Profar signing, he posted that one. And then the day of the Michael King one, we have this one on Sheel. that is not exactly timing that makes a lot of sense, because that one, you want a real firebomb of like, hey, it's not the Seidler bros, let's talk about Sheel. It's after easily your best and most complete pitcher who you got and was amazing for you and had that incredible playoff game, that you're thinking of trading him now? We already knew about Cease, right? We knew about Cease. That one was kind of one that everyone was like, okay, right? We knew about Cease, but it's both of them now? Right, so for that to come out, it's very suspect timing, and that's why I understand people getting annoyed. And admittedly, Padres Nation out there, I'm fairly new and not as attuned with the history of the reporting in San Diego, the reporting of, any sort of sports scene around there, the reporting of whether it be Jeff Sanders, whether it be Kevin Acee, whether it be Dennis Lynn, whether it be whoever, right? Heck, whether it be Ben and Woods, whoever it is, I'm not as familiar with the past history, right? And I saw someone message me like, hey, AC, kind of might have Warwick carried a little bit for the Chargers, and you saw what happened there. So I get that. But overall, it's still tough, man. I mean, it's in the article, Peter Seidler never stipulated in his will or his trust who the Padres control person should be in the event of his death. There's just a lot here. But I do understand that if you just look at it at face value, and you see when he posted these articles, it's not great, right? You could have done the Sheel thing, at least not immediately after. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could have done that, like, not immediately after, or potentially not immediately after. There's something about the timing, and I agree with Padres fans on that. And it's tough, because Jurickson Profar, as he was interviewed, by the way, after signing, he said, yeah, the Padres have some issues with the ownership and all that. That's now the second time we've heard from a player, the other one being Roki Sasaki, that there's problems with the ownership. And it's all of this culminates, right? I've talked a lot about this today. All of this culminates in a situation where I really do think we're cooked. I think we're cooked. I really do. I think we are in so much trouble. I did not know how bad this was going to be. I'm going to answer some of your guys' questions in a little bit, but I did not know that this was going to be a situation where the Padres would be just completely hamstrung. I mean, the only move they've made is Martin Maldonado. Again, I did not expect big-time stuff. But I thought, Higashioka didn't go for, like, a crap ton of money. This guy wasn't making Jordan Belfort money, I think you can afford players like that, and they aren't. And I just think the timing, they've spent about $18 million since the Seidler brothers took over. Or I should say, since Peter passed is the better way to phrase it, right? And then all of this coming out, you lose Profar, you lose Tanner Scott to the Dodgers, you miss out on Roki Sasaki. All of this, it's very hard to not see or to see this as a coincidence, right? So that's where I'm at. It's very important not to take sides immediately. We're going to find out at some point, right? Like, I think we're going to get more litigation out. I think there's a Texas court that's going to review the kind of the validity of Sheel's claims, right? Like, there's going to be a lot of aspects of this, and it's very difficult. But I think if it hasn't been made clear already, the Padres are really in trouble. And I will say, for people who are pointing out, because I just want to address this point one more time, because I think I got some comments about this, like, why would Sheel file this lawsuit? You made us lose out on Roki. I think one of two things. Number one, that, that it's possible they already knew. That's been my conspiracy theory, is that Roki decided months ago, and again, that's whatever, right? Like, plenty of sports have this. I think he decided a long time ago, potentially, to go to the Padres. There's just some things that I talked about at his signing that, to me, didn't line up too much. But I thought that, I thought maybe he decided already, so that doesn't impact things. And number two, if what Sheel is alleging is true, and if Rob and Matt, their side of, hey, we're trying to do what's best for this team too, whatever it is, there's the possibility that losing out on Roki Sasaki is going to be pale in comparison to what could happen. The problem is we don't know which side it is that could be the right one, which is the side that will be like, yes, maybe we're not going to go crazy like we did with Peter, because we don't have the TV deal, right? Those are things that impact teams, despite what Dodgers fans will have you know. No, not every team can fully compete fully on the price level that the Dodgers can, because they have a huge TV deal as well. Padres don't have one. Obviously, that Bally Sports thing, we don't have time to get into all that, but that was rough. I do think that that would pale in comparison to, let's pretend for a second that the Seidler bros are on the right and Sheel wins and she gets primary control, and the Padres revert back to what they used to be, which was a team that wouldn't spend $52 million on Chase Headley, right? So that's where we're at. That's why it's complicated. And all I know is the only empirical truth we know for sure, and I know everyone's got a lot of opinions on who's right between Sheel and Rob and Matt, whatever. The only thing that is true is currently the Padres are in a lot of trouble, and I frankly do not believe that they're going to be they'll be competitive next year because they still have a lot of good players. And as I've mentioned before, Tatis has so much upside. It's possible he's like an 8-win player that can just carry a lot of the missing pieces they lose on offense this offseason. But man, is it going to be rough. It's going to be rough. And not to mention Jackson Merrill could get better too. So they still have a chance to be a competitive team. But what it takes to potentially dethrone the Dodgers, unless maybe some other team beats them and we get lucky, you know what I mean? Like they get take care of, Atlanta takes care of them or something like that because of seeding. I don't know, but it's not looking great, guys. Not looking great. But it's time for the mailbag. We're going to answer a lot of your guys' questions and some comments that I saw, including a Brandon McCarthy tweet that I thought was very funny. And we're going to do it real fast. We're going to do it like rapid fire, like, you know what I mean? We haven't done a rapid fire type of mailbag in a while, and I'm excited for it. But before we do that, guys, just need to take a quick break so you can hear a word from our sponsors. And just like that, everybody, thriving and vibing into the final segment of this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, let us get into it. First of all, assistant to the junior GM on Twitter, he DM'd me saying MLB should implement a cap structure similar to NBA. If you exceed the cap, you can't sign If you exceed the cap, you straight up lose draft picks and can't sign international free agents. Trade options are limited to the point where you need to trade away equivalent money if you acquire players in season. Hard cap on deferred contracts. Make it so you actually have to weigh the options because right now rich teams do not give a crap about the tax penalties. Now, I will say I agree with that last point about rich teams not caring about the tax penalties. It doesn't have baseball has had this issue for a long time, and frankly, this goes even before the Dodgers, and it's a result of other teams the league just not figuring it out, right? The league not like figuring out what to do, whether it be Dodgers, whether it be Yankees, whether it be even Orioles back in the day, right? Braves, all these teams that like they did not figure out how to potentially figure out whether it be rules in case of this or it be like rules in terms of things to figure out these things, like there's no penalties or at least not as much of a penalty, or figuring out how to get owners in this league that all care as much as Peter Seidler did, or as much as I always blank on the Dodgers owner name, but Dodgers owner, or Middleton of the Phillies, right? Or George Steinbrenner of yesteryear, right? So that's the issue. And he gave like some movie pop culture comparisons regarding the last 3 to 4 months. It's like that scene where Dany is going back to dragons so to Game of Thrones, and then Euron snipes her dragon with that big harpoon. That was right before the 24 that was right before the 24 inning scoreless streak, and the Dodgers, all the offseason moves are Euron and his big old harpoon. Those who haven't seen Game of Thrones, apologies for not getting the reference, but yeah, it was just like so random if you have seen that scene. It's actually, by the way, Game of Thrones last season, not great, but let me tell you, like, that scene is so random. It's like actually almost unintentionally hilarious now if you look back at that it's just casually just riding the dragon just gets knocked out of the sky, and this is not a show like that if you haven't seen Game of Thrones. But appreciate your messaging in, my friend, as always. Blue Goon on Twitter, he has responded to me a bunch of times over the past few days, but he said, nah, Rosenthal is trash in the eyes of Padres fans. Remember, don't believe it, in reference to the Michael King report. I think that both Ken Rosenthal, we can have problems with him, and also acknowledge that he's usually pretty tapped into scoops and things like that. And also, this would be, if you play by that logic, this would still be an anti-Padres thing. I'm not saying he's 100% right, and I just don't know what he would exactly gain by saying they might want to trade a player, especially given that we know they've been trying to trade players, right? Like this would kind of just line up with all we've seen, except that now it's Michael King. And again, to add even further to the Seidler bros and things going on right now is like, it's one thing and a correct thing to bring up, hey, Padres spent a little bit irresponsibly over these past few years. It's not all on that, right? But they did spend a little bit irresponsibly. I've talked about the offseason with Bogaerts plenty of times on the show, but the other thing is arbitration, first time in 10 years. That's a tough coincidence to swallow. And more importantly, that's like no money. You're telling me we're $200 million this year. You can't just spend like 700. What is it? Like they were 750 apart. I forgot what the filing number, or $1 million apart. You can't go to 212 and go to 203 just for the guy who was your best pitcher, just for arbitration. It's not a long-term contract. This is why the Padres are in trouble. That is what the Milwaukee Brewers do. You know what I mean? So again, that's the problem. But continuing, because we got a lot of questions, man. Let me tell you. Another one from Blue Goon. He says, question, does this exacerbate your belief that San Diego really missed their title chance after losing that 2-1 lead versus the Dodgers? Dodgers fans, including myself, are enjoying our popcorn right now, but also remember the awful McCourt years that the Padres might be experiencing soon. So I have to admit, I'm not fully ingrained in what happens in the Dodgers' bad years. I will say that the Dodgers have always been a fixture in baseball, so it wasn't quite doom and gloom, but I understand because, like, let's look at, say, the Mets with their Bernie Madoff stuff, right? Like, big markets can have their moments of being rough, right? The Dodgers have always been pretty competitive, and I imagine that the McCourt stuff pales in comparison to, you know, some of the other worst teams, you know, Oakland and Cleveland and Milwaukee and Tampa, right? But I get that. And I also, my belief was that was the time, man. Because you didn't have Walker Buehler at full strength. You didn't have Tyler Glasnow. Did he pitch at all that series? I don't think he did. You had Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who's making at least, he's a rookie. He's great. But it's his first playoffs. Like, maybe you can jump in on that. And they did jump in on him the first game. And then you got some other injuries too, from Bobby Miller to a bunch of others. Shohei's still not pitching. That it did feel like that was your moment to strike, and of course, inexplicably, the offense died. So that's just what happens, right? So I really do think it furthers my belief, right? And this is, you get that feeling sometimes. Apparently, unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs, or you're the New England Patriots, or you're the the Dodgers, some of these teams, apparently, like, you have a window and then that's it sometimes in sports. It's weird though. It goes back and forth. Speaking of the Chiefs though, Brandon McCarthy, former pitcher, really funny Twitter account for what it's worth. Like, one of the more funny guys, former baseball players, like, genuinely a really good follow no matter what fan base you're part of. And Brandon McCarthy, I believe, did he pitch for the Dodgers at one point? I think he did. I think he was bad for the Dodgers. I'm going to check really quickly. Let me see. Yes, he was. He was with the Dodgers. He was actually okay for them. Yeah. His first year was bad in 2016. Second year, he's actually pretty good, 3.98. But anyway, Brandon McCarthy had a funny tweet after the Chiefs, if you guys haven't heard, won their game and they're heading to the Super Bowl. He tweeted, personally, I'm getting sick of baseball's financial structure. Give us a salary cap so we can have parity like the NFL. Good tweet. I will say that once again, and we're going to get through some of these questions real fast, it is a misunderstanding of the issue that you think the only reason people are mad about the spending is just for World Series. It's not that. And I have people in my life who are like, what's the point of playing the season? There's still plenty of reason to play the season. The problem is there are so many fan bases that are not engaged in the sport because of stuff like this, right? Look at what happened to the Padres. They're top 5 in attendance now. They're super into it. Sometimes obnoxiously so. Padres Twitter is a little bit annoying. Not even a little bit annoying. Very majorly annoying sometimes. And I think that this is like a byproduct of that. So my issue with the Dodgers, yes, their fans can be obnoxious, and frankly, it's the internet, so sometimes it's a little bit unfair for me to talk about some of their comments, which we're going to get into, because it doesn't portray the full fan base. But I do think that it's the Dodgers fan base can be obnoxious, and number two, it's just not fun, right? It's not fun for the rest of the league that even when a player that's not barricaded by money incentives, that they still go to the Dodgers. And I understand part of that is because they've been scouting him since high school and all these things, but still, it's just people have a very real reason to be upset with how this system is, whether it be because they're just mad that the Dodgers are benefiting from their owners' thinking, or it be the owners themselves. That's kind of where we're at right now. So again, it's not just the World Series. I think it's important to emphasize that. At Kathy16620 says, just because the Padres didn't get Sasaki, it doesn't mean they did not commit tampering. Darvish also tried his best for the past couple of years. Sasaki was also photographed wearing a Padres uniform in Japan middle of last year. I do remember that. I think that the ownership thing probably ended up being a little bit of the reason, or at least a big part of the reason why he didn't choose the Padres. My conspiracy with Roki Sasaki was like, then why are you taking interviews with the White Sox? It doesn't make sense to me. Like, I don't understand. Like, you didn't know about this? It's just a weird vibe. It feels like we were being strung along, for lack of a better word. And no, I said in my episode that I absolutely believe that the Padres tampered too. Are you kidding me? My issue wasn't with the Roki signing. My issue wasn't that the Dodgers tampered. My issue was, I think that this happened a while ago. Did the Dodgers tamper? Potentially. Do I care? No. I don't care. Like, the Padres probably did. Plenty of teams probably did. I've been watching sports for a while, guys. Like, you think teams, like, don't have some stuff? I remember when Magic Johnson, when he was the GM of Magic Johnson. I said that name weird. Magic Johnson was the GM of the Lakers. He went on Jimmy Kimmel and basically tampered on live TV with a free agent at the time, right? It's just like, this happens. I'm more saying I do not believe that this was as much of a sweepstakes as I think it was reported. But that's just me. Next comment, at Mr. Loco George or Jorge. Anyone, I don't know, it's a Jorge. Anyone involved with Padres cannot cry sympathy. You can't go and ask for pity when the Dodgers went from the McCourt era to be the powerhouse, which took 10 years. Dodgers were always called chokers, and the one time the Padres beat the Dodgers, they were the worst fans. Just remember the crying Kershaw. Padres deserve everything they're getting. Now, I will say, remember that a big part of this is that our owner died. I'm not saying that you're saying he deserved to die. I'm saying that that's why we're upset, because clearly Peter Seidler's passing sent this team down a tailspin of bad management and stuff that puts the future into question, right? I do kind of agree, though, with the choker thing. That's fair. That, like, if we're going to be calling the Dodgers chokers for a long time, as someone else also pointed out, by the way, in a comment that I'm going to pull up right now, from at The Godfather 1955, the Padres embarrassed the Dodgers in 2022, and the D-backs did the same in 23. In a way, it might be the reason why the Dodgers are now going all out with their pocketbooks. Agreed. However, it does look bad for fans because they just won. But I do agree with what you're saying, that basically for the majority of the last, like, 15-ish years, the Dodgers are primarily just known for really bad playoff performances, namely Clayton Kershaw. They're, like, in my opinion, the face of their team of the 21st century, right? Is that fair? Clayton Kershaw? I imagine there's probably still some Dodgers fans lurking in the comments of this episode when it comes out. Is that fair? I think it's fair, right? Yeah. That he was the one that just was really not pitching. He wasn't, like, awful throughout the entirety of the playoffs. It's just that this guy was invincible in the regular season and became very much human all the time in the postseason. So that's kind of where I get that. At Johnny Dangerously 9598 says, get Roki for fun? Dodgers have been scouting him since high school. I mean, in the sense of they very clearly do not need Roki Sasaki. Like, the team is not desperately in need of another starting pitcher, or in need, frankly, of any starting pitcher that is a star caliber player. They don't need him. That's what I was saying. At Charlie Lucky 24 says, you guys talk about baseball, but don't really know what you're talking about. That's fair. Sasaki never once said he wanted a small or mid-market team. His agent, when asked, said, I don't know what his preference is. Maybe he wants a small market team so there's less pressure. It's going to be his choice at the end. Now everyone is going around crying about he wanted to go to a small market team. Second, no players were allowed during the first round of meeting, but they were allowed during the final meeting. Hence the Padres players and Dodgers players being in the final meeting. I agree with that last point. I did not realize that part of it was just that he didn't want it in the initial kind of meeting, and that would track, honestly. I do disagree with your first part. Agents know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Agents know what they're doing. They're not just casually putting out there things that suggest that he might prefer a small market. They're just not, even if it's might. I just don't think you're doing that, right? I just think it's weird to me, but point taken. Next one. The unbiased Dodgers fans, this one from at user DRYM5JR71. The unbiased Dodgers fans? You mean the unbiased Padres and D-backs fans? Yeah, of course. My joke is that I get so many Dodger people who love to criticize me as if there's no bias there. You know what I mean? We're all doing it. It happens. Next question, though. Let's see what we got here. Let's take a break from the Dodger people for a second and let's respond to Mr. Cam Wordplay, who says, Javi, it's somewhat understandable why the Padres couldn't bring back Higgy, Solano, and Profar given the huge salary increases they earned. I think so, but again, I really think they could have brought back, like, one of these guys, especially Higashioka, because Higashioka, if I'm not mistaken, got paid by Texas, and let me see if I can find his contract really, really quickly. Higashioka is $5.75 million. You can afford that, but point taken still. And he continues to say, But why not at least re-sign David Peralta? We are desperate for depth in the outfield. He was a solid lefty bat off the bench and filled in well for Tatis during his injury. Furthermore, he was a fantastic teammate in the dugout and clubhouse, and unlike the others mentioned above, he should be earning the same, if not less than last year based on his advancing age. And let's face it, with Tatis' injury history, he could easily miss 40 50 games again, depending what happens with the rise. Peralta could even be a decent DH. Just looking for something positive here other than Tyler Wade. Yeah, I think there's going to be a player like that. Like, I don't even know if it's Jorge Polanco. I know he's more of an infielder, but I don't know if it's going to be Polanco. I don't know if maybe they do a JD Martinez thing. I think they'll sign a player, but it's going to be like a Donovan Solano, like minor league deal type of thing, and maybe they'll bring someone in. But Peralta, I don't know, maybe. But there wouldn't be a rush on a player like that, so it could still very much happen. Moving on, though. Let's see, what's the next one? At NightGoat666, you know what's really weak is the Padres bleeping on the bet in the offseason and blaming the Dodgers. Now that's really weak, LMAO. I don't know if we're blaming the Dodgers, but I take your point. At Carlos Rules, I've seen this tweet a lot, by the way, this line of thinking. Dodgers sign all the players. Yeah, like Juan Soto, Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, Garrett Cole, Max Fried, Ronald Acuna Jr., Pete Alonso, Trey Turner, Justin Verlander, Josh Naylor, Fernando Tatis Jr., Francisco Lindor, Bobby Witt Jr., Chris Sale. Yup, great Dodgers they are. You're missing, I think, my point, and maybe I haven't got that across as well, is it's not that they sign, it's not just them. The Dodgers are indicative of a greater issue, which is just that all those players you mentioned, Bryce Harper, big market team. Manny Machado, trying to be a big market team. Garrett Cole, big market team. Max Fried, big market team. Acuna, the Braves, they go in for it. Pete Alonso, currently a free agent, but he was with the Mets. Trey Turner, Phillies, big market team. Verlander, he signed with the Giants. That's a team that sometimes tries, right? Josh Naylor, blah, 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 Francisco Lindor, Bobby Witt Jr. Bottom line is what I'm saying is this. It's not good that there are a significant amount of teams that are contenders that do not try every offseason. And that means less people care about the offseason, less people are in tune with the sport as a result. That's what I say. Man, let's see what else we got here. At Mike VQ8ZW says, you never know. This could turn out to be exactly what baseball needs. There are no guarantees in baseball, although when you have an all-star at every position, your odds are pretty good to go deep into the playoffs. However, once the playoffs start, anything can happen. Once the wildcard teams eliminate each other and only the good teams are left in the playoffs, if the Dodgers are only going deep in the playoffs, or lose in the World Series, it would show money can't buy you everything. The Dodgers most assuredly will win their division and once again have to sit around and wait again. That waiting time hasn't always been beneficial to a lot of teams. So if they exit early, that would be awfully embarrassing. Pressure is going to be on the Dodgers, not their opponents. Agreed. However, again, it's not my issue with the Dodgers and what the Dodgers say about baseball is not just, wow, there's no reason to compete. It's not that. It's not that. It's that it's not good that only a few teams get stars. Or have the chance at stars. I think my bigger beef is with a team like Cleveland than LA. I don't like the Dodgers fans because they're annoying, right? But that's just me. Moving on, and then the total opposite, at CDMix2709 says, baseball doesn't need to do bleep. Any team can offer what they want and pitch whatever sales pitch they want. At the end of the day, it's up to the player to choose where they want to go. I don't want anyone telling me where to work. Let the teams change their culture and make it a destination for them want to go. Now, this is an extreme, this is a little bit of like a straw man, dare I say, but no, it is not true that it is just team culture and that teams can pitch whatever they want. The Dodgers have a sizable advantage. Same thing with some other teams, that if they really want a player, they can outbid anybody. Other sports don't have that. There comes a point where it's like, whoever has the most money, but also who has the right team and whatnot, plays a little bit more into a factor, but whatever. Let me see. I like this one at JDKWWW. If you hate the Dodgers and your team's owners and draining all your fun, the answer is simple and something else on which to focus your attention. Or the answer is simple. Find something else on which to focus your attention. Also, you better understand human beings can be self-centered and rich people can be especially guilty of this viewpoint. Finally, everything is cyclical, having a beginning and an end. So you might try to have some perspective. I could continue, but the critical points have been addressed. It was a really esoteric response to my videos, but I agree. And also, I do have other things that have my attention. And I agree, everybody, look, I was watching Secret Base's video on the history of the Minnesota Vikings. Blast watching that. I was watching A Real Pain, starring Kieran Culkin. Great movie so far. I haven't finished it yet, but really, really good. there's plenty of other things. Like, I got plenty of things to pay attention to, but I agree. Everybody just like enjoy all the other arts and all the other entertainment forms we have out there. Absolutely agreed. At SMX Wing, the lazy coworkers are complaining to the manager that the good coworker is making them look bad because they actually work. Padres haven't made a single move, and they want to call foul SMH defending billionaires. I'm not defending billionaires, and that's a misunderstanding of my podcast. I hope most of you understand that. The reason the Padres aren't spending is because ownership, dude. Like, that's what we're complaining about. You know what I mean? And we're annoyed that the Dodgers are unfortunately succeeding and doing well because this is a really messed up league that is kind of broken in a lot of ways. And I'm going to end it with this because I am so tired of hearing about this. And since it is a new offseason, I'm going to answer it one more time. At Crypto Bill 6188 says, take a risk and sign Trevor Bauer for the league minimum. It would be cheaper than Sasaki. Otherwise, all teams have no excuses. Another comment as well about this from at FAC3308. Longtime Dodger fan here. Sucks to see what Padres are going through. At this point, the Padres should break away from internal MLB politics and bring Trevor Bauer into the Padre fold. Sounds crazy, but it's worth a try. I could talk about this for days. I recommend everyone go check out Breaking Balls, podcast by my friend Emily Nyman. She talks with one of Trevor Bauer's accusers and kind of breaks this down. But here's what I'm going to say. Guys fundamentally who believe that this is politics, Trevor Bauer would have sued already. Just a fact. Would have sued already. The reason he's not is because they had an independent prosecutor. Not prosecutor. Was it arbiter? I think was the title. I forgot. But reviewed all the tape, reviewed footage and all that stuff and decided, yeah, this guy's got to get suspended. And no one's touching with a 10-foot pole. This is not politics. This is not politics. You want to say it's because, he's a right-winger? Blake Trinan is getting paid like crazy by the Dodgers, right? Manny Machado got paid a lot by the San Diego Padres, right? Baseball is chock full of right-wingers, left-wingers, whatever. They've got everything here. It's not politics, if that's what you're implying. And if you're talking about MLB politics because Bauer made them look bad, it's not that, all right? It's that if he goes out and sues, a lot of people are going to see a lot of the stuff that he's been accused of. That's what's going to happen there. And it's absurd to think otherwise. And even more, it is genuinely annoying to me that everybody's acting like teams haven't shown in the past that if they are able to, they will sign problematic people. Trevor Bauer has a lot of stuff, guys. And I'm really tired of this. You really think teams wouldn't sign this guy? You really think that? Really? Aroldis Chapman got signed, guys. What are we doing? Stop saying this. It is really, really annoying. And like I said, go to Emily's podcast, go check that episode, and go check out the accuser on Twitter. She'll dismiss all of your points. It is patently absurd to keep raising this up. Get over it. The guy isn't good. Okay, guys? And I'm not just talking about baseball. All right? And I could spend a lot of time talking about that. In fact, I did an episode with Emily. You could also check that on Breaking Balls, where I talked about and ranted about it a little bit too. About just the history of, how things work in the world, I think, is the way I put it. But on that cheerful note, everybody, we are about done with today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast. Went a little overboard. Didn't get to answer, actually, like every single question. And we will save them for later. Don't worry. We'll save them for next episode. Next Monday. But if you didn't get some of your thoughts and you want to get them across, feel free to leave a comment below in the YouTube and also reach out to me at Javipeno on Twitter/X or Blue Sky at Javipeno again, JAVIIPENO. Go check that out, guys. Stay vibing, stay thriving as much as you can. I would recommend staying away from reading up on the latest baseball rumors, maybe. Just wait and have it come to you because things are not going well in Padre land, let me tell you. But until next time, whenever we get some news, stay safe and stay safe. And of course, stay faithful, my Fire Faithful homies. Take care.